Hello, and welcome. I'm gonna give us a minute or two for people to kind of trickle in here before we get underway. How are you doing this afternoon, Clint?
I'm doing well. How are you today, Peter?
Good. Yeah, I'm doing good. Not too shabby. We got lots of rain here, so it's weather, but it's good weather. I like a little bit of rain.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get underway with our fun question of the day. For those of you who are new and unfamiliar with our process, we like to get things going with a kind of completely irrelevant and off-topic question for everyone to answer in the chat. So, Clint, my question for you is, what food do you like to eat leftover, cold, and not heated up? So that's the question. So which leftovers are better not heated up rather than heated up? And for all of you who are joining us now, please answer that question in the chat. We'd love to hear what you think.
I mean, obvious one, pizza, right? Yes. Pizza's a very clear, like, yeah, this is good cold. It's all right. I would probably heat it up, but if you're being especially, let's just get some pizza out of the fridge and eat, then yeah, that's fine too. I would, to the question of what's yours, Peter?
Well, I don't see, I respectfully disagree. I think that, a slice of pizza reheated in a toaster oven, there's really nothing like that. It's like it's brand new and fresh out of the, I don't know if you've ever had that, but a toaster oven is worth keeping in my kitchen for that reason alone, because the leftover pizza reheats just so nicely. So, but my mother was also of the same mind as you. She was a big cold pizza eater. So there's that. But I'm wondering if, like, other things in that category, like chicken wings, if there's anyone who would rather have cold chicken wings, cold pasta. I don't know. I think there's nothing. I think there's nothing that I would prefer cold to heat it up. One of our guests is cold pasta for sure. So I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. There's also like let's say you got, I don't know, a Firehouse sub or some sort of long, one of those long sandwiches, whatever chain that is your go-to. And you eat half, you put the other half in the fridge for later, for the next day. If it's got lettuce on it, do you want like reheated lettuce? No, if it's cold cut, go ahead and eat it.
One person says brisket is good cold, which I hadn't thought about before, but I think I could agree with that. I think I could imagine that. And another pizza. We have another vote for pizza for sure.
Yeah, if it's the right brisket, I think I'd take that at just about any temperature that's edible.
Absolutely. And your point about lettuce is very well taken. Some things that have lettuce in them, you don't want to reheat. That'll be a disaster.
Yeah, or then like if you are adamant about I'm not gonna eat this cold, then you gotta like deconstruct your sandwich or whatever it is. And can you do it? Sure. Should you?
Yeah. No hot lettuce is. We have someone concurs in the chat. Absolutely. So, all right. Well, we'll get underway here with target deductions now that we've covered the most essential information. Pizza, brisket, okay to eat cold leftover, but just about everything else is pretty controversial, except for pasta, apparently. All right. Well, on the next slide here, we've got our introductions, our titles. I've got Clint with me here today. He's our target person. He knows all things Target, and is really heading up the Deductions Navigator tool for Target. So we love to have him come in and talk about all things related to being a Target supplier, Target 101. And I just am here kind of trying to generate more content like this with the supplier wiki team. So we're trying to create free educational content to be the educational wing of your business. And that's what we do over on our team. Alrighty, so for today, high level view of what we're going to be getting ourselves into. At the beginning, we'll just do kind of an introduction to target deductions. What are the most common target deductions? What are their codes and all of that, kind of doing a high level thing. before getting into the process of gathering information, distinguishing AP deductions from AR deductions. We'll talk about how do you dispute invalid AP deductions, tracking disputes, and then we'll open it up for a kind of discussion and Q&A session before giving a demo of SupplyPike's tool Deductions Navigator for those of you who signed up for that. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in the SupplyPike solution to deductions with Target, then stick around for that. It'll be a great time. All right, here's some frequently asked questions that we get with these webinars. So if you're visiting again, then this is probably review for you. But if you're here for the first time, welcome. We're so glad you're here. You don't need to take super vigorous notes. You don't need to be taking screenshots and vigorous notes of everything that's going on, because we'll be sending you a copy of the slide deck in the next 3 to 4 business days. We've also started posting the recordings of these webinars on our YouTube page. So if you just Google or if you just search on YouTube SupplyPike, you'll be able to find us, and you can subscribe to our channel and stay up to date with all the things that we're covering, if that would be beneficial to you and your business, or maybe your team. Another thing that we like to differentiate, some of you are familiar with the chat function, which we've been using already to talk about our controversial opinions about cold or reheated foods. The chat is for public discussion. So anything that you have, any kind of information that you have that might be relevant to someone else who's zooming in, any kind of answer to one of the questions that we have. If you want to say something for everyone, it goes in the chat. If you have more of a kind of a proper question for Clint or myself, go ahead and put that in the Q&A section. That way we can kind of process those two things separately. Sometimes if someone accidentally puts something in the Q&A section that is, I think, relevant to everyone else, I'll kind of call it out. So it's no big deal if we switch it up, but that's the difference between those two functions. Sometimes those get switched around a little bit. All right, now I'll give a kind of a larger introduction to what SupplyPike is, who we are, what our goals are, before getting into the meat of Target Deductions. So our main goal is to help suppliers minimize revenue loss. That's the new direction that we're moving in. We want to be able to help you in as many ways as possible to make sure that your revenue is solid, to make sure that you aren't leaking and bleeding revenue in myriad different ways. So right here, we have some of our partners listed that we're very proud to work with. And as we always like to say, if you don't see yourself there already, we hope to see you there one day pretty soon. One last side note before getting into the real meat of the content with Clint today. We have a focus group that we're doing to try to improve Supplier Wiki's content, right? So if you are a regular subscriber to these webinars, if you love our articles, if you like what we do, or if you really don't like what we do, sign up for the focus group and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. We're constantly trying to figure out how to better reach suppliers of Target, but also suppliers of Walmart, Amazon, Kroger. If you're a supplier of any kind, please, we'd love to hear from you, and we love your feedback. Also, I will leave a link to sign up for this focus group in the chat as well as we go through. So watch out for that. All right. And then with that, I think that's the last thing before we get underway. So I'll just hand it over to Clint and we'll get into it. All
right. Thanks, Peter. So yeah, Target Deductions. What are these things? So it is what it sounds like. They are deducting from your checks. But real quick, let's just talk about 2 types of revenue loss that happen with most retailers. So you've got the accounts payable, the accounts receivable. This is from the retailer's point of view. So it's Target's accounts payable department or Target's accounts receivable department or Walmart. So when you get a check issued, you're expecting, hey, I've got this many invoices going to these different locations and it's for this amount. Target will say, yeah, here's that amount minus a little bit that we think you owe us for some reason. There's another style of way they do this where they will send you an invoice based on some sort of charge they valid or invalid they think is relevant. but they send you a bill versus on the left-hand side, the accounts payable one, they're taking it straight off of your check. So in this case, Target takes almost every type of deduction straight off of a check, any kind of revenue loss. And we'll get into kind of the 7 main types of those a bit later. But that's how it works in Target land. Other retailers may do both or one or the other, but Target is just accounts payable deductions. So in case you're flipping between retailer worlds, just know that that's what we're doing here for Target. So I mentioned 7 different types of deductions that Target will hit you with. So here they are. And this is primarily in Target's lingo. So they use the term invoice match, and those would be things like shortages, cost differences, substitutions, case pack issues, things like that. Those are the most common ones. Pretty much every supplier runs into those. And yeah, we'll be spending more of the time on the content around some of those here in a bit. There's the return damage defective type, which is what it sounds like, returns from stores and DCs based on damages or defectives, or just suppliers or a customer didn't want it. Compliance, if you're familiar with the Walmart world, this would be OTIF. In Target, they don't really use a fancy acronym within Target, they just call it compliance. This is your on-time ship if you are collect, on-time arrival if you're prepaid, your supplier item fill rates, your 856 fees and fines. So that's that type. Those come across in your check line starting with a VC. There's the contractual type. Target calls these vendor income. These are things related to promotions or discounts, coupons, those sorts of activities that are kind of written into contracts that Target and the supplier agree upon together. But Target doesn't always honor those, so or maybe they take more of a discount, or things can get complicated. So not every deduction is valid, but just calling that out here. There's the e-com types. You'll see these on your check lines as starting with a DVS reason code or document number. And it's kind of like a combination of compliance and invoice match, but specifically just for .com. And if you do any import business with Target, you may know that has a very its own specific app within Partners Online, and we'll talk about Partners Online here in a moment. But that's a different type of deduction. And then the one at the bottom here is unpaid invoices. So they're not deducting anything from a check. They're just ignoring what they should be paying. And it's on the supplier to keep track of that and to go create a dispute in Synergy. We'll talk more about that. It's Target's dispute portal, providing proof of delivery or shipment to get paid. So yeah, they're not taking anything from a check. They're just ignoring that they should be paying anything on a check. So but we lumped that in here together, and we'll talk more about why that is a bit later. So we will move along here. A special note on compliance deductions. So we're all aware supply chain has been growing in its share of voice and media attention since the beginning of 2020 and the pandemic, when we found out how resilient or not different parts of the supply chain were. Think of toilet paper not being very resilient. And in reaction to a lot of that, different retailers, Target among them, have been coming out with more compliance fines, and they've been making more robust and elaborate systems to track those and try to, shore up their bottom lines from their business with suppliers. And in Partners Online, that's Target's portal. If you use one of the search boxes in the top right corner, you can type compliance policy, and it'll be one of the very first results you'll get in there. And they've got a handy dandy Word doc. It's about 19 or 20 pages. It's not terrible, but it is a bit long. But it kind of details the ways you can deal with that. So just wanted to mention that up front, because we're going to spend the majority of our time here talking about the invoice match, the shortage related deductions. But if you want to know more about compliance deductions, drop a question in the Q&A. We can talk about that. So what is Partners Online? Also sometimes referred to as POL. That's Target's acronym there. So it's their ecosystem that contains all the apps and reports that are relevant to suppliers. So it contains all the useful documents and essential guidelines. So if you need to look at, am I getting paid? You can look in the accounts payable app in Partners Online. But yeah, think of it as like their foundational box where they put everything for suppliers, and then there's different platforms and applications within that box that we'll talk about here in a second. Yeah, so use it to access just about everything. It's your home base. So up front, because we're talking about deductions here, Target has the Synergy Vendor Dispute Portal. And this is where you dispute the vast majority of deductions with Target. So it's an app. You can create them and track them. It's not the most user-friendly, but it's what Target provides for you. Veteran Target suppliers, you may recall that it used to be named Vendor Dispute Tracking, or VDT. They rebranded it and changed a little bit of the interface and features in spring 2021. It's about February, March, they were rolling out that change with suppliers. And yeah, so you can dispute just about everything. You do have to get proof documents and some other supporting information outside of Synergy, but that's where you go to do the actual business of disputing for Target. Other important apps, so accounts payable domestic. This is where you can see your checks, anything that Target owes you, upcoming deductions, invoices that they have or haven't paid. Again, it's not the prettiest, but if you spend some time clicking around into it, you can make it work for you. The vendor report card. So this is a specifically a compliance app. So if you want to understand, are we getting our orders in on time or in full, that's what this is for. So can help you understand any sort of inefficiencies or bottlenecks or areas in your supply chain or your shipping that may not be going as well as they could. Target will hit you with a fine, and they'll post that in vendor report card. So it's a good idea to take a look at that. And supplier performance management is the same thing. The difference is that Target has two purchase order formats. If you log into POL often, you may notice that, I think was it yesterday or Friday, they posted a note that there was an error where they sent out duplicate orders, each with the different formats, and that's not, an order should be one or the other. They shouldn't come in both. So so just to say at the bottom here, they've got the modern format, which has these 11 and then 4, and then the old format, which is the 474. So that first 4 on the bottom would be the department, purchase order, and then the location, so the DC that it's going to. And then at the top, it's just the same PO number in the middle, but it's led with 1000 at the front. And then again, the location at the back end. So these two apps, if you're concerned about, hey, how are we doing on, our on-time arrival, if you're collect, on-time ship, if you're prepaid, how's our fill rate, how's our item fill rate, you can use these apps to dig into that information. This is also where you would go if you're trying to request an exemption. Target will give you a 2-week window to request exemptions for compliance fines. If you miss that window or they deny it during that window, you can then dispute it in Synergy. You've got 90 days to do that for these compliance type deductions. Other apps, so Inspectorio. This is a third party that Target uses around like sourcing. So OBS&D is the own brand sourcing and development. And yeah, for quality and compliance audits. So if you are a vendor that works with Target in that manner, you should have an Inspectorio account, or someone in your company should, because they will fine you, and you'll need to be able to get into that app to deal with those. Target Vendor Income, it's its own app. It's got a couple of apps within that. They're making some changes to this one. If you watch in Partners Online, the news feed and that on the front page, they've made quite a few updates to the Target Vendor Income guidelines in the past several weeks. mainly just shifting things around, but something to keep your eye on, and for understanding your contracts with Target for promotions and discounts, those sorts of things. Vendor management and maintenance, that is what it sounds like, but it's also the only place you can see your payment terms listed, and that varies by department. And you can also see department level return policies. And speaking of return policies, there's the Launchpad app. And this is where you can see some items have their own varying return policy. So for example, if you supply certain private branded items to Target, perhaps you negotiated that Target has to pay for the financial disposition of any of those returns. Versus if it's your own items, likely you, the vendor, would have to pay for those. But that's where you can see that item level differentiation on return policy is in the Launchpad app. Cool. So let's dig into identifying deductions and gathering documentation. So to find them, there's no great way to do this within what Target gives you. So as we mentioned kind of through that list of apps just now, your main sources will be accounts payable domestic, the payment information, because then you can see for what you have been paid, the check lines, and you can see what's actually been deducted. And they will give you a reason code and not much else. So if you know how to, if you've looked at them a lot, it can mean something to you, but generally it's just going to be a lot of letters and numbers jammed together. Same thing for the vendor report card and the supplier performance manager. That's where you can see those compliance level disputes. They do deductions rather. They do give you a bit more information in those apps. And they've got some guides around using those. If you spend, 15, 20 minutes in each one, you can start to get the lay of the land of, okay, what is this? Where is this? How does it work? But you'll need to spend that time for the vendor report card and this SPM app. If you are looking at your check lines, some common ones you may see, we've got these two types we're highlighting here, the invoice match and the return damage defective. So we're going to be spending the next several minutes looking at the invoice match type. So the A030, 36, 38, and the A176s. If you've got questions on these return damage defective types, do drop those in the Q&A, please. And a lot of those are typically going to go back to your return policies. But again, policy can vary by department and also by item. So, okay, so the most common code for deductions, and the most common deduction Target suppliers see, and we're working across about 140 Target vendors at the moment. It's definitely this one right here, the A030 carton shortage. So it's a deduction issued against an invoice for the difference between what was on the invoice and Target's delivery receipt. And yeah, generally it's going to be a carton shortage. And the wording of this is a little funny because they say the majority of the difference is due to. They'll sometimes give you a deduction with this code, but it could be multiple issues underlying it. And they do this a couple of ways, but if it's, thankfully Target's not too picky. If there's a few issues on a delivery receipt, they'll pick one and then you can handle the rest of them in the details of a dispute case. But yeah, most common one here. So for example, if you're shipping 100 items or 100 cases, Target says they got 80, they'll issue a deduction for that 20, saying, hey, you owe us, for this 20. And that may or may not be valid. There's reasons why it could or could not be valid. If you think it's invalid, that's when you would go pop into Synergy with all of your proof documentation that you've covered and create that dispute. Speaking of proof documentation, recommended for this dispute, for this deduction type, you'd want to have the chargeback copy. So that comes from within the accounts payable domestic app. There's a little box in the bottom left of the screen called the credit debit memo detail report. click through 3 or 4 screens, and then you can get to this chargeback copy based on the document number that you got from your check lines. Also very helpful to have would be a copy of your invoice. If you've got it, a packing slip and a signed proof of shipment, or if you can get it, Target's proof of delivery. So you can either request those if they don't have them. Sometimes when you create the dispute, they'll bring them up for you to select if they've got it. But that's kind of Target's record of the delivery. And if you've got your invoice and the bill of lading from your warehouse, or if you're prepaid from your carrier, they'll be comparing those documents against each other if they read the case. More on that later. Okay, next one that's pretty common is this cost difference, and is what it sounds like, right? So they're looking at the cost of an item on the invoice or perhaps from the purchase order, and the cost they're showing when they receive it. And if there's a difference, then they'll issue a deduction based on that difference per item, round summed up, right? And these can be, it depends on who works your case, honestly, how easy they are to win back. So similar to the shortage, you want to have a copy of the chargeback, you want to have a copy of your invoice, and they say they want some sort of communication from your target merchant about the cost difference. You don't always need that, but if you do have it, great. Do definitely include that, because that will help expedite and get your money back to you if it was an invalid deduction and you have written proof that says, hey, this item was changed at this cost and here's what it should be. And so definitely include that if you've got it. Another relatively common one is the A038 substitution. So if Target had an order for, we want the Crest White toothpaste with, tartar control, but somehow, and they wanted 100 cases of that, but somehow 80 cases were that, and then 20 cases were not tartar control, but making it up, the extra protection, whatever toothpaste. So if they find that an acceptable substitution, they'll take it. If they don't find it an acceptable substitution, then they'll issue a deduction for that difference of, hey, we're missing this. And depending on your agreements with Target, they may do something different with that inventory, right? If they can reuse it, they'll definitely apply it somewhere if they can. If they can't, or if depending on your agreement, they may ship it back to you. And then they'll probably issue a deduction for shipping it back. Recommended documentation for this one. So similar to the other ones, go grab your chargeback copy, invoice copy if you've got it, packing slip, signed proof of shipment and delivery. And if there's documentation around what should have been in there, and if maybe the merchant issued an 860 EDI document, which is a purchase order change, maybe there's something around that where they change the order after the fact, and perhaps you don't participate with EDI 860s, and that's part of your known agreement with Target, but the system, not all their systems talk to each other, so they miss that, and that's some very relevant context that you could provide in your dispute, and that could help you get your money back for these. And I will say there are vendors that do exactly that, so it's based in fact. So this one, the A176 auto chargeback. So this is a fun one. It is what it sounds like. It's system generated. The language around these earlier ones is that they are manual deductions. For sure, this auto chargeback. So do you remember that term at the earlier part where we said they're invoice match types? And this one goes to the heart of that matching process. So they're looking at 5 different fields, like your vendor ID, the invoice number, the invoice amount, and comparing those to like your delivery amounts and cost. So if any of those things are different, they'll automatically kick off a chargeback based off of that. And when it comes across, it just says A176 auto chargeback. And it could be a shortage, it could be a cost difference, or it could be a substitution or a case pack, internal or master issue, or a combination of those. It's not too uncommon to see these, and there's shortages and cost differences listed on there. So we've done a little bit of work on this for our app that we'll talk about later during the demo, but the way to understand what's going on for these auto chargebacks is to get a copy of your chargeback document. And then you can look into the details of, okay, what do they actually say has happened here? And you have an option of how you want to dispute it. If it has multiple issues that they're listing on the chargeback copy, you can decide to dispute one way, and you can do multiple disputes if you want to. And again, have your invoice, packing slip, proof of shipment, proof of delivery, and any sort of case back information if you've got it. Okay, so let's talk about the little bit of the nuts and the bolts of doing the actual disputes. Okay, timelines for disputing. So yeah, generally try to keep an eye on these once a month, or however often your checks come in. It could be weekly. Typically, Target cuts checks every Tuesday and Thursday. But yeah, at least get in there once a month if you can make the time for it. It's definitely worth it. So the maximum time window you can do any disputes, and this is a kind of a hard thing that's put into Synergy if they can identify the document type you have, is 18 months. So if you're a prepaid supplier, you can take full advantage of that 18 months. For the invoice match types like the shortages or the cost differences, substitutions, the case back issues, those are 18 months for prepaid. Collect suppliers have 9 months for those. And the reason why is because if Target decides that, hey, you're right, we took that invalidly from you, it was not the supplier's fault, it was the fault of our consolidator or our carrier. In that case, Target then has to go make a dispute with their carrier or their consolidator. And that's why they put a 9-month limit on there to say, hey, we need, if the vendor is not on the hook, someone else is on the hook, and I'm guessing it's part of their contract with their carriers and consolidators that they've got to get it within that window. So that's why they have that for collect suppliers. But for all the other types, aside from compliance, so if the return damage defective types or the contractual target vendor income types, the .com types, you've got that full 18 months to deal with those. And for the vendor compliance, reminder, you've got the 2-week window to request an exemption from those fines. And if you miss that 2-week window or it's denied during that window, then you've got 90 days from the date of the deduction to take care of those. And so Target's SLA for making a call on a dispute case is 30 days. Generally, they will make a call around 25, 26 days. Sometimes it's quick, around 23, 22 days, but generally it's going to be in the mid-high 20s before they make a decision, approve or deny. Okay, and I will note that if they want to ask you for more information, for example, so let's say they need some more clarity around it, they won't update you on that in the case and then wait for a response. They will deny it and then tell you to make a new case. And then it'll be another 20 so days before they get back to it again. So to get to Synergy, you want to be in Partners Online, and then you can click at the top of Partners Online. It says Apps and Reports, and you can go down to the S, they're in alphabetical order, find Synergy, and you can click Launch, and then you'll, over on the left-hand side, upper left-hand, when you land in Synergy, there will be this little Create New Case button. So you can click that, and you can do Start a Dispute. If you've got questions about a chargeback, you can, or you're just unsure, like, hey, what is this line on my checks? You can use that request for copy/info and tell them, what's this document number, or if you've got a purchase order number that it's related to, just some sort of information they can use to track down what you're talking about. You can ask for more information there, and they'll either give you more information or they will close the case and say they can't find whatever it is you're talking about. There is a dedicated accounts payable contact list. We can talk about the details of how to get to that if you guys need it later, but that would be kind of a, if it fails in Synergy, definitely reach out to the accounts payable team. But typically the accounts payable team will ask you to start in Synergy first. Okay, so if you do create a new case, you'll be presented with this prompt, and the document field, that's where you would put that document number that you've recovered from your check lines or from the vendor. Yeah, the vendor compliance check document number would also be in your check lines there. Generally, they will pre-populate, hey, what is this? Is a deduction, or if it's an unpaid invoice, you would put your invoice number and they will hopefully recognize that it's an invoice. If it's not, you can pick that yourself. And then on the reason for disputing, that's when you can say, hey, I'm disputing this because it's a carton shortage or an unpaid invoice or a cost difference, something like that. The brief explanation for raising the case down at the bottom there, that's where you provide the context. That's where you make your case, right? So if you're going to court to say, hey, this is not right, we are innocent, this is not a valid deduction, that's where you can give those details to explain what's going on here. Perhaps Target misreceived it, and you can say, hey, you said you're short 20 for this item on this order for this appointment on this day at this DC. You're actually over 20, that same item at the same DC for a different appointment on the same day, a different purchase order. So use that overage to cancel out this shortage because it seems like it got misreceived at the DC. That's where you can put that kind of information to make that case. So once you've filled out that information, hit next, and you've got this really quick summary screen. So you'll just want to double check and make sure all of that looks good. And then you've got a few fields here. Typically, you do want to dispute the full amount, but if you know that, hey, some portion of this is valid and some of it's invalid, that's where you can fill out that disputed amount for specifically what you are disputing. And you'd also want to have included that in this brief explanation field as well. And then they'll pre-populate some of this information if they have it. If they don't, you'll want to provide that in that explanation field. So once you click next, if they can give you related documents, such as that chargeback copy or a delivery receipt, they'll have those here, and then you can take a look at them. We'd recommend you put eyes on the delivery receipt. That way you can see what is Target going to be using on their side to say what they think they received. That's what they'll be referencing here. Because if it has your vendor name with an expected amount for the order, say it was 100, and then it says in handwriting next to that, we received 100, that's definitely likely invalid. So you'd want to dispute that. If you look at it and it says, oh, we expected 100, we got 90, okay, maybe. But if you know that you packed and you picked correctly on your end, definitely dispute it, because if they look beyond just that first layer of details, they may discover, oh yeah, actually, okay, there's more to the story than just what's on the delivery receipt. And if you need additional documents, so putting in your copy of your invoice, or perhaps you pulled some of their receiving data out of Vendor IQ or any other apps that you use based on the Greenfield platform within Partners Online, you can add that here. Or like if you've got those email copies and PDF or .eml file from your merchants, if those are useful here, or Target's inventory analysts, for example, that's where you'd want to put this information. And in general, the most helpful things, some sort of proof of shipment delivery, BOL, invoice, and like we said, email approval, some sort of communication from the merchants and or inventory analysts. are really useful when trying to get these overturned. Don't always have to have them. We try to use the term recommended for a lot of these. It's great if you do, but you don't have to have them. Sometimes Target will take them with almost no documentation and pay them back, but they may also deny it and say, hey, we do need some further proof to support these claims. So tracking, now that you've submitted your dispute, how do you keep track of it? That's where you can come back into Synergy, click the cases link on the left-hand side of Synergy. They'll give you a list of all their cases, and they'll show, hey, I've got this first one that popped up that I just submitted. Great. Come back in 20-something days to take a look at it. If they did need more info, you'll get an email about that if they said they need more info, but then they'll have quickly closed it. So you won't be able to take action on that because it's usually seconds difference. When you look at the timestamps, they'll say, hey, we need more info. Here it is, deny. But that's where you can keep track of it. And you can also filter by ones that are closed. So what's been denied, or if there are any that have been paid, you can check resolved and then look for some that have amounts greater than 0 for resolved. So speaking of statuses, in Synergy, there's a handful. New is what it sounds like. So you've created a dispute, it'll stay in new status until Target does something with it. Once they start looking at it, they will be looking at it during the new status. They'll make a call and then they'll quickly click in progress and then click through to something different. Reopened is a very uncommon status. I think we've seen it once, maybe twice across, I don't know, tens and tens and tens and thousands of disputes that we've looked at. Typically it just means they're changing some quick details, but it's not something where they're reopening it and waiting on you to take some action as a vendor. They're just updating something on their side. Awaiting info, again, very rare. If they need something, they'll have put it in the status to maybe generate an email that goes to the vendor to let them know they needed something. Then they're going to close the case and you'll have to start a new case or some other form of communication in order to keep that dialogue going. So resolved, if they're going to pay back anything, the case will flip to resolved status. If they're denying it, it will go to closed typically. Sometimes they'll resolve things with 0, and it may get paid, they may update the amount later, but it's closed and resolved are kind of tricky statuses to deal with. And so yeah, it's worth noting that some that are closed have been resolved, but not all closed have been resolved. So just something to keep in mind, that it's not always straightforward based on the statuses. Okay, that was a lot of information. I hope we've got a few questions here. So I will be quiet for just a moment.
Hello, Clint. Yes, we've got a number of questions here, and I assume a few more will probably trickle in as we get going. First off, we've got one from one of our guests. Target is customer pickup for us, and they tend to deny all of our disputes due to the items being SLC and palletized. We are okay getting full pallets back, but is there a way to get the individual cases?
Yeah, so that's the most common reason why they deny, or while they'll take deductions and then while they will deny them. So, but it's also the most frequently overturned deduction. So upon being persistent and disputing things, 2 or 3 is the average it takes to get those paid back. But we've seen it take up to 8 times and 6 times in some instances. And part of what this goes back to is it's not what we want to hear, but the reality is they're not always rational for why they have denied something. And that's frustrating because being the vendor, you want good information, reliable information. You want it to be meaningful when they tell you, oh, we denied it for this reason. that may or may not be the case, unfortunately. And that's what we've seen, right? The fact that you can redispute it so many times, and then that it does get overturned upon subsequent disputes, that tells you that, oh, maybe this wasn't the issue, right? So I would say in those cases, you can get them paid back. It's if you've got if you can get into Target's receiving data, right, in their Greenfield platform, either via vendor IQ or the vendor report card or the supplier performance management, you can use that to go to some of their order level detail, item order level detail. And if you can check the columns, or if you're doing like the fill rate original or fill rate revised, whichever one of those programs you're on, if the data's in that column, like I mentioned earlier, that kind of scenario of, oh, well, we were, you said we're short this many within, one pallet or something. Maybe, but what if you weren't, and they just mishandled it at some point when they were scanning the boxes in? If you can see in the data that they're over by the same amount for the same item on the same day, the same DC, oftentimes that's what has happened there. But also sometimes they've just miscounted, or they misinterpreted the way something was written down on a delivery receipt, and upon further inspection, which that tends to be the reason why it takes so many disputes, is having someone actually read through the details and dig into a case. Upon further inspection, you can get those disputes approved, but it does take persistence, but it can happen. So I would say definitely be persistent, dig into the data, hang around. Later we'll talk some more about some of what we're trying to do with our software to make that easy. But yeah.
Okay, great. One more. Oh, sorry.
I was just saying, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And on the next, we'll go to the next slide here in just a little bit. We've got a few more questions, but on the next slide, we've got our emails too. So if you have any follow-up questions for us, if you feel like, sort of answer the question, but you've got a follow-up question that we can't get to here, go ahead and shoot us an email. And we'll either answer the question there or send you along to a person with the answer if we don't have it ourselves. A few more questions for you here, Clint, though. For the substitution charges, can Target be receiving the wrong amounts at the wrong DC?
Yes, they can. Yeah. You hope they don't, but it can happen. It tends to especially happen if you are collect and it is going through a consolidator. Yeah, that can happen. So, and again, that goes back to, can you find the data visibility to show that to them and build that trail of breadcrumbs so that they can understand, oh, okay, I see. This is maybe what happened at this step along the process where it was fine. Suddenly it's not. What happened, right? So those can be overturned, but you've got to have the data to do it and try to present it in a convincing way. Yeah. And if it's on the table, you can look at what would it take for us to switch from collect to prepaid if we wanted to do that. Obviously, there's a lot of cost balancing between the time and the effort and the money involved in handling the logistics yourself for your company versus letting Target take care of it. But that isn't always an option, because we do tend to see prepaid suppliers do tend to have slightly higher success rates with disputing Target as long as they're on top of their logistics. But again, that can be a tough order, right? It's very attractive to let Target just handle it themselves. Like, hey, you pick it up for me. I gave it to you full. It's on you after that. So
yeah. And some CPGs have different assets on hand, right? So for some, there's a lot of employee hours that you can throw into doing the prepaid thing and trying to figure out your logistics. Whereas others, well, we've got some capital that we can throw into a collect program, and then that we can use to dispute fines like this one. But yeah, so it's a big can of worms.
Always trade-offs. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay, this isn't so much as a question as a comment from someone about emails and contacting Target. I have never received an email requesting more documentation, and then I have never received an email at all on a dispute. Do you know, is that kind of common, or is that okay?
It is very rare. So it goes back to if they're using this kind of reopened or awaiting info status, if they do that, then it kicks off an email automatically, and they like. And I've also wondered, did they click it by accident? Did they not mean to click this, but they did it, and then like, oh no, and they clicked away. Because yeah, when you look at the timestamps between like how the status has changed, like it's very rarely in this status for more than a second or two, if that long. So yeah, generally it is very rare. But we want to point it out just in case you do get one, like, hey, just be aware that it might happen, but it's extremely rare. I think we've seen, like I said, less than 5 out of tens of thousands of disputes. I don't know how many deductions we've handled at this point, but less than 5. So yeah, it's very rare.
Okay, great. One more question here. Can you talk about 2-week window disputes? Those don't go through Synergy. What are those?
Yeah, so that's the vendor compliance disputes. So I said they're not. So for vendor compliance fines, Target will tell you ahead of time with that 2-week window, hey, we're gonna fine you, but here's a 2-week window to request we do not fine you. That's the exemption period. And you access that via a breadcrumb trail of the contact form down at the bottom of Partners Online. You have to click through several menus to get to it. And then it's literally like a contact us form on their website. Like, put your subject, put your details, add some attachments, hit send. And that's how you handle that 2-week period. If you miss the 2-week period, or you do that and then they deny it, and that email would go to the email associated with your Partners Online account that submitted that. Then that's when the vendor compliance fine is actually deducted, and then it gets a VC code that'll show up on your check lines. That's when you can take it to Synergy, and you have the 90 days to dispute it there. So yes, that 2-week exemption period, that is handled through a contact form on Partners Online. And if you need a little more details on it, there's this part right here on the compliance, all the way back at the top. Yeah, here it is. You'll want to search for this compliance policy, like literally those 2 words, in Partners Online, and you can get their Word doc. It's like 19, 20 pages or so. It gives you details on that 2-week window and exactly what you need to include along with those through the contact us form. But that's how that works and where it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm adding to the chat right now an article we published a little while ago about compliance deductions at Target. So that might be able to provide a little bit more information there if you find that helpful. Why don't you go on to the next slide there, Clint, to show them our emails again. First name dot last name at supplypike.com. That's how you can reach us. Again, if there's anything that we didn't cover, if there's something you want more detail on, even if you just have a suggestion for a different webinar subject altogether. Right now, we're looking at how can we dig deeper into Target? How can we find something that suppliers are really struggling with, something that suppliers, some answers that suppliers want for certain questions. Please email me that. We would love to have that information so that we can keep you all informed and up to date with everything that's going on. All right. But if you don't have any questions, I think right about now, I think we have time to go into the Deductions Navigator Demo. So if you didn't sign up for the demo, you're not interested in that, that's okay. You can step off at any time. We're gonna walk through SupplyPike's specific solution to some of these deductions issues at Target. And Clint will walk through some of the highlights of that program. It's something that we're really excited about. We really love Deductions Navigator at SupplyPike. It's a very, very cool thing that we're very proud of. So Clint, take it away.
Yeah, real quick, I saw someone had a follow-up question in the Q&A. Yeah, if they deny that shortage claim and you've submitted all the info, yeah, that's basically your recourse is create a new case, same information, same documents. Typically, you don't need to change anything. When people do get paid back successfully based on redisputing, they didn't change anything. They just tried again and got a different result. So that's the recommendation there.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Do we have time for another one, Clint? I know that there is.
Yeah, we got a moment. I'll pull double duty here and answer questions while we pull stuff up. So yeah, what's the next question?
When you create a case again, does it duplicate? I think it's a kind of follow-up question to that last one.
So when you create a case for something you've already tried to dispute once and they denied it, they will give you a little pop-up that says, hey, you've already got a case on this. Are you sure you want to do this? You should click yes, I do. And they'll give you a new case number that's assigned to that. So, but yeah, but you'll still have to add, the dispute type and the explanation for why you're disputing it. The case you're making, as if you're in court. You'll still have to re-upload your documents. So, and pick your amount and all that stuff. So you do have to redo all of that. They don't just reuse the information previously. You have to put all that in yourself again. Okay.
Thanks.
So here's our app that we've built. It's called Deductions Navigator, to try and automate a lot of what we just talked through. So whether it's tracking down your documents, whether it's understanding what deductions have I received, how much are they for, what items are they for, where are they happening? So for instance, if, maybe it'd be really helpful to know for your logistics team, hey, anytime we have orders that go through DC 3806, like there's issues. So maybe we need to be careful and triple check any orders that go through DC 3806, because there's a certain consolidator that always picks those up and seems to have issues, that kind of information and more. So yeah, here we go. When you land in this, we give you a quick highlight of, okay, how many deductions have you received? What's actionable? What's approved? What's the win rate based on things you have chosen to dispute? What did you win divided by, what has had a decision made on it, approved or denied? Some further breakdowns of what's not disputed. Did you mark anything as I will not dispute it because we know it's valid? What's in process at Target right now? What have they approved? What's moved from approved to paid? And what has been denied? And you can kind of click through like, hey, I just want to put those together. We don't care about the distinction paid or approved yet. Typically, they move quickly from here to there, approved to paid, thankfully. If you want to know what's my top reason code for deductions, this mimics a lot of suppliers. It is typically that carton shortage. What's the count? What's the amount? If you need to sort through those and understand, okay, well, yeah, maybe the amount's the biggest for carton shortages, but perhaps, one of them has a high count. So for instance, we don't have any return damage defective types here in our demo at the moment, but if we did, maybe there's a high number of those for a low amount. Same thing, focusing on the amount versus the count. Oftentimes you'll see this where the lower buckets based on this dollar amount will shoot up when you look at the count versus just the amount. And your item breakdown, like, okay, are there specific items that we know have issues, maybe based on the way that they're loaded onto a pallet, or whether they're master packed or in a break pack or something. So that could be useful information for you here. And like I mentioned earlier, if you want to know, Are there specific types of locations we're having issues with? Okay, DC 3895, that's where we're seeing a lot of issues. Hey, let's look into what's going on, who's picking up, who's handling those. And if you wanted this information in a spreadsheet form, you could click export and you'll get all this data as it is into Excel. You can filter by the date. So if you wanted to focus on, I just want to see my latest fiscal year or my fiscal year to date or Target's fiscal year or just the month of, let's say, let's pick the month of October to now. Okay, cool. Only 80,000 that's happened October to now. Great. And then quickly clear that. So looking over here at the deduction page, this is where you can really start to get into the meat of what's happening in the app here. So the most common one, those carton shortages. So actionable looks like we've got 670 worth about $1 million. We can see, okay, this one is a deduction itself. Here's the document number, the purchase order it's associated with, our invoice number for the, right, this is your business. Here's how much it's for, and here's when we received it. If we disputed it, this would be the amount we disputed, and we'd have a date down here as well. For example, we can see, oh, here's one that was paid. We disputed it, and it got paid. If there's any you chose not to dispute, or if they're done, so they're already paid or they're already denied or something, or they're too old to dispute, perhaps they would live here in archived. Anything that's in progress, that would be listed here. And with the status target research, again, those ones you can take action on, that's where we see them. We've got this really cool feature called readiness. So if you click that, it'll quickly filter down to deductions that have what they need based on our recommendations and what we've seen work across suppliers to get approved. So they've got their proof documentation. We've got the CB document, the chargeback document. We've got a copy of the invoice. We've got a copy of the bill of lading or proof of shipment, and we have Target's delivery receipt as well. So it'll quickly filter to just those. And if you wanted to, you could kick off based on, let's paginate to a few more here. Say, okay, we're filtered for ready. Let's do ready for A1s for the A030 carton shortage. And we actually interpret the A176s for you. So we'll tell you, not just as an auto chargeback, we'll tell you isn't a carton shortage type or a cost difference type primarily, because they can be multiple, but we'll pick both of these. And we're ready for both of those. And let's say, we want to filter based on anything under $500 perhaps, or let's say $1,000. That's 100. There's a few. So under 1,000, here we go. Here's $80,000. I can check here, get all of those, and submit those disputes. So we've got 100 that we're going to line up to submit. Oh, looks like we've got so this is a demo account, but in reality, that would kick over. We can do a couple here. Yeah, okay. So demo environment's always fun, right? There's always these little things that can happen. I will check with my engineers why that's happening on our demo account, but the detail page here, if we dig into one, because these do have one by one disputing. So when you get to this blue button here and click submit dispute, it shoots it to Synergy. In our production app, what happens when you bulk select those like we just did, it does shoot all 100 of those over and queues them up and creates all those cases for you automatically in Synergy, and it will have all this information behind it. So, right, we've got a shortage, it's for this amount. We see that it was on this purchase order from this invoice, Target received it at this appointment, at this location. We got paid for it on this date. So the check number where the deduction came from is this check. And here's our item level breakdown. Perhaps we want to see, so it's not real data. That's why we see items like concrete salad or granite sausages. interesting supplier that they have these types of items, right? The salmon style concrete salad. But this would be Target's item numbers versus a UPC. And count of here's what the invoice had, here's the received, here's the difference, here's the cost, there's your amount, and those total up to the deduction amount seen here. And we populate a default message here, and we provide those proof documents. So we've got our chargeback. If you need to see a bill of lading, we've got that attached on there. If you need your invoice, we'll have a copy of that. Purchase order, Target's delivery receipt. So if you collect, the delivery receipts look like this. There's these multiple vendors here, right? So here's a shortage for someone, that's in full, that's short, based on Target's point of view. But we grab all that information and put it in here for you so that when you want to change this from not disputed to sending it to Target, you can click submit dispute. Oh, that did not work in our demo environment. Okay, I promise this works. We've got quite a few companies that are using this for this. But if let's say you wanted to say this was valid, you could mark it as will not dispute, and then it gets archived and it would show up on that archive side. And if you change your mind later, like, oh, I didn't mean to, or we found out more information from our warehouse or our logistics team that, oh, actually, we should dispute that, you can re-enable it and go after getting the money back from Target. And let's say, you wanted to further dig into some of these several at a time, you can just kind of click through like, okay, here's this one, here's that one, here's that one. So I will pause right there.
Yeah, Clint, we had another question kind of about the app itself.
Sure.
And I think that you mentioned something about this at the beginning too, so this may just be kind of review for all of us, but can we export the sections on the dashboard page or get that breakdown another way?
Yeah, so if you want this breakdown here, yes, you can use this export button and that will create an Excel export that you can open up. I think I'm only sharing my Chrome right now, so I don't think that would show up here, but I think I can share it. One moment. So here's what that would look like. This is the file I just exported. You can see, I guess we don't put a timestamp in here on when we export it, but oh yeah, there it is, dashboard export today. Yeah, it has that same receive actionable or approved, and it has that breakdown of what's not disputed, what's in research, approved, paid, etc. So yeah, if you need to grab these to pop them into a presentation or something, or an email, or in your own format, you can quickly grab that to handle that. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. All right, well, I think that's about it. Maybe, Clint, would it be possible to switch over to our emails just one last time, if there's anyone who would like to see that again? And we'll keep that up for just a second here as people kind of trickle out. But thank you all so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to get together and to talk Target. Thank you, Clint, for your time. Clint's a really busy guy. He takes a lot of time out of his schedule for us over on the Supplier Wiki team, and we're really grateful for that. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll get those emails up here for just a second longer, and I will close this out. All right.
Yeah,
thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Just saying thanks for the questions. Hope everybody learned something, and hope to hear from you guys. If you've got any questions we didn't get to, or you want more information, yeah, definitely shoot an email. Love to hear from you.
All right, thank you all. Stay tuned for more webinars and stuff coming out from Supplier Wiki and SupplyPike. Thank you all, and see you all around.